Of course, one of the biggest stories in the NHL recently has been the relocation of the Arizona Coyotes to the state of Utah. Now we're looking at an article from ESPN with a lot of revealing, somewhat shocking details about how this team was operating under owner Alex Muriel, some of their key business practices, and a lot of the things that went down behind the scenes that led to the team not being successful for its arena and unfortunately relocating. We'll discuss those new details coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, of course, we know one of the biggest stories recently in the game of hockey in the NHL has been the Arizona Coyotes being a team that's been sold and relocated to the state of Utah and Salt Lake City. Now, technically, the Arizona Coyotes still exist here today. They've been deactivated by the NHL, and owner Alex Muriel will have an opportunity within a 5-year span to bring that team back. But we're going to go over a lot of details today and a new ESPN article that just came out from Emily Kaplan talking about a lot of the things that went down behind the scenes that you may or may not have known, which obviously might not give you a lot of confidence, at least in this current owner's ability to reactivate this franchise and bring hockey back to the Coyotes faithful. Obviously, there was and is a strong fan base there, but maybe not to the size that they needed to be successful. It has not helped that they've really struggled with having a permanent arena that works well and good location. That's been an ongoing struggle pretty much the team's entire existence. But let's go into some of the details here on this article to kind of look at some of the backstory as to kind of what led to things. Now, of course, this article kind of goes back to the beginning, if you will. It just kind of goes through some of the other struggles before even Alex Muriel took ownership. Just as a quick reminder, even though relocation officially happens here in 2024, it was really close to happening in 2009. At that point, the Coyotes were hemorrhaging money, just absolutely losing tons of money every year. And owner Jerry Moyes, who had owned the team since 2005, so only 4 years, put the team into bankruptcy. He basically just handed the keys back and said, I'm done. Now, he did that with the intention of Jim Balsillie to buy the club. Now, if you don't remember who Jim Balsillie was, he was a very well-known at the time billionaire in trying to enter into the world of being an NHL owner, and really didn't make a lot of friends, wasn't exactly well liked by the NHL executives and Gary Bettman, etc. He was the owner of the company called Research in Motion, which was what created the BlackBerry, of course, one of the world's first smartphones. Everybody had a BlackBerry before they had iPhones or the Samsung Galaxies and all that, right? I know I had a BlackBerry at one point, and well, Jim Balsillie was the leader of the company behind that. So that's where he made his money. But so the intention of this team going into bankruptcy by Jerry Moyes was for him to buy it and relocate it to Hamilton, Ontario. Ontario almost got another team close to Toronto. I mean, Hamilton's got a fairly big market. I mean, I think they're around 1 million people or something like that as a population. Obviously they've had Hamilton Cops Coliseum there for a long time. It's a big area of Canada. It's maybe not as big as some of the U.S. markets that don't have clubs, but it's a market that I think would be successful. Of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs might have something to say about that, and I'm sure they would have. But that was the intention. They were close to relocating at that point. And of course, the NHL as a league steps into the bankruptcy proceedings. They kind of intervene. They basically blocked Balsillie from buying the team. Like I said, I don't think he was really well liked at the time by NHL executives. So they weren't. I mean, they would have had to approve him to be an owner anyway. I don't know that was going to happen by the sounds of things. And they ended up taking control of the team. They owned that team until 2013 when they sold the team to new owners. And when they did that, it had worked out for them to move to Glendale to play out of where they were, the last NHL arena they had. Of course, at the time was called Gila River Arena, where they had a 15-year lease in Glendale. And all thought, okay, this is it. This is the solution. Well, it didn't take long at that point for things to not go well after a couple of seasons of not great attendance numbers and the team continuing to struggle. New owners not doing the greatest. By 2015, the relationship with Glendale was already kind of going in a negative direction, if you could say, if you will. City Council at that point voted to end the lease. So that 15-year lease, only a couple years into it, bam, they end it, and they voted to replace that lease with a series of shorter-term leases at a lower rate. So, I mean, at the same time, it made things a little bit more affordable, but at the same time, like, it didn't give them that long-term security and viability. But in the couple of years leading up to it, it wasn't going well. So really, the relationship, I think it was fair to say, wasn't working the greatest by both sides. And they also had concerns that the owners of the Coyotes had violated their lease agreement because they were getting $15 million a year, and there was concerns that it was going to pay down debt, which was not what it was intended for. So there was some concerns around that, which is what also part of what led to Glendale deciding to end the lease. And of course, in 2021, we saw the relationship completely fall apart with Glendale. They ended up deciding to not to renew the lease, effectively ending the tenancy of the Coyotes at Gila River Arena, finding them homeless, where they eventually landed in Mullet Arena. And of course, before that happened, not long before that, we had heard that the Coyotes only had, I can't remember how many days it was, but they were given a tight timeline to get their lease payments and taxes. They were behind in a bunch of bills, arena costs, local taxes, etc., and they had to come cut some checks in a hurry, or they were going to be forced out even sooner. They end up at Mullet Arena. The first year apparently was a little bit of a novelty. A lot of players seemed to be thinking it's kind of a cool experience. It was a very nice college rink, but not NHL really. By year two, it was really, the novelty was wearing off. According to the sentiment around the league, visiting teams were kind of not thrilled and not looking forward to going to Arizona anymore. After they did it once or twice, it's like, okay, this is kind of getting old. I don't really want to do this anymore. And then we saw the NHLPA leadership change with Marty Walsh. And I do think Marty Walsh had a big voice and a lot of pressure here to kind of push things along to make things, progress towards a solution, even if that solution meant the team leaving and moving. Of course, the Tempe situation was going to be the savior. Again, the Muriel group has this referendum in Tempe, and they completely blew it. And I honestly believe, based on what we've seen and heard, that they could have done a lot to help their cause there, and maybe it would have worked out. But again, lack of money put into the campaign played a big role from what I've seen. Like the proponents voting no invested a lot more money getting the message out than they ever did on the yes side. It was substantially different. So once that Tempe vote failed, even NHL, everybody was kind of looking at things as, okay, we're doomed. We're done here. And, relocation became a really viable option at that point. It took a long time before they got to the point where they pulled the trigger on it, of course. But that's when kind of the wheels kind of started in motion here. And, of course, Ryan Smith and his group in Utah had been talking to Gary Bettman in the NHL for a few years at this point. They've been wanting a team for like 2 or 3 years that they've been having, meetings just to keep the interest there. And, originally thought it would be expansion and whatnot. And then it was in March when Bettman and Daly came to the Smith group and said, can you guys pull this off? And they were confident they could. And while the wheels were in motion from there. But, that's the history. Like, this is not the first time this team was close. It's been close to moving on several occasions. 2009 probably became the most likely, but then even in 2015, I remember seeing the city council meetings in Glendale and what was going to happen, and a lot of talk it could happen then. Like, it's been very stressful on the market and the fan base for the entire time. And the current owner just really has not done any better. And some of the business practices that we kind of heard some rumblings about before that were revealed and discussed in this article and confirmed by multiple sources, certainly it's a real head scratcher on how they can be, so successful in other aspects of business and how they became to be so wealthy with these kind of business practices. And why should they ever be allowed to be an NHL owner again? Like, for example, the article references the team's creative accounting was a constant source of concerns around the league. For example, the stuff that we'd heard about the hotels. This article does confirm from multiple sources here that the Coyotes would attempt to have their hotels be like lower cost, cheaper hotels than what the CBA even permits. So that's all outlined in the collective bargaining agreement. Of course, that way it's consistent across the board on what quality accommodations teams will have on the road when they travel with the NHL. And the Coyotes would quite often try to go with lesser quality places to save money, even though it was against the CBA. And then we heard about the unpaid hotel bills. Well, they weren't necessarily unpaid like forever, but they were really late making payments. And then there were times, and this is multiple sources in this article, get this, there'd be times when the hotel bills, they would take the amount due, they would scratch it out, put in a lesser amount that they thought they would be comfortable paying, and pay that instead. Is that not crazy? But like I said before, this is not the first we've heard of these business practices and this type of accounting from Muriel. This is the way he does business all across the board. They'll make contracts and they'll agree to things, and then they don't pay them, and then they try to get away with paying less. And he does this with a lot of stuff. That we've seen player signing bonuses not be paid on time. Obviously, that good luck trying to negotiate that. I mean, that you get the NHLPA behind them. You're not going to win that battle, that's for sure. But like a lot of these other unpaid debts, look at like they were behind on lease payments to your, Glendale Arena, the taxes, and I guarantee you, it's not that he doesn't have the money all the time. He just comes across as being cheap and trying to save money, and that's just how he stays rich, I guess, is that he doesn't want to pay stuff. So he just says, well, I don't want to pay that, so I'm just going to pay this amount instead. And he tries to make settlements, which to me is, from a credit perspective, horrible. How is your credit rating not tarnished and ruined because you'd constantly be paying things late and trying to settle? So like, how many hotels have you pissed off around the United States and Canada with your team traveling that probably don't want to do business with you anymore? You're late paying your bills, and then when you pay it, you get the bill back with a check and be like, oh yeah, that's, I don't think 10,000 was fair, so we're going to pay 7, or whatever. Like, you don't make up those amounts. Like, that's absolutely insane. Have you ever heard any other stories of other NHL owners doing business like this? Completely crazy. There was also reports in this article about them cutting corners to save money by removing the printers and copy machines from the coach's room. So how difficult would it have been for Andre Tourigny and his staff to do their jobs? Printing, that's not expensive. When you're talking about, multimillionaires, billionaires, like business of this level, a copy machine is probably the least of their expense, that they need to be worried about. We're not talking about a little mom and pop small business with 5 employees and they're struggling and it's a bad economy and they're trying to find a way to save a few bucks. We're talking about billionaires. Like, ridiculous, and making everybody's lives that much more difficult. We heard about the toxic work environment, and I can't say that this is linked to it per se, but we'd heard lots of rumblings about that before. I know Katie Strang's article in The Athletic back, I think it was near the beginning of this current season, somewhere around there, in the fall, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was in, I can't remember. It was within the last 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months, talking about how there's been a lot of reports of, toxic and just not good work environment around the Coyotes. And in the last 12 months, they've lost major executives from their team, including their chief business officer, including their executive vice president of communications and broadcast. And that executive had been on the job for 27 years. And they would look at all the bad owners that they worked with. And apparently Muriel is the one that they couldn't stand the most because that's when they left. Look at all the crap they put up with over the years with ownership groups there. Not that they were bad people, but just, the practices and the levels of being unsuccessful and all the things they put up with. And then yet Muriel comes in and that just takes the cake. They're out. And then, of course, the team COO as well. So it's 3 major executives that left in the last year. Get this. Now, we know Alex Muriel Jr. has way more involvement than he ever needs to. Of course, again, no experience in the game of hockey. That's this guy whatsoever. You talk about nepotism and, people getting opportunities because of their rich parents. Well, this is a prime example of that. We know Shane Doan, the face of the franchise, all-time greatest player in franchise history, the only player to have his number retired. Okay, we know when he was retired that he went into working with the Coyotes in their front office. Okay, we knew long-term that he'd like to be a general manager. And we knew that long term, like he's going to continue rising up the ranks. Like Shane Doan is a lot of ambition and wants to move forward. And apparently, when they were looking, obviously he was interested in being the team's president of hockey operations. And then, of course, we know that he didn't get the job. And we know that he ended up leaving the Coyotes, and now he works for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, apparently it was Alex Muriel Jr. that delivered that news to Shane Doan and told him that he was not ready to be a president of hockey operations. Alex Muriel Jr. told Shane Doan. How in the world would Alex Muriel Jr. have any sweet clue who was ready for what in the game of hockey? Now, there's other reports saying that Alex Muriel Jr., like, for example, when they were interviewing GMs, so when they hired Bill Armstrong, when they're going through that process and having a lot of GM some of these guys, of course, some of them had previous experience or had been assistant GMs. There's reports that he would be talking to them about his fantasy hockey team and asking them for advice on trades. Like, he also reportedly had a lot of control over their social media, which explains a lot of their posts, which just craziness. This, like, I can't believe how much control he gave his son, and to let him deliver that kind of message to the team's all-time greatest player. Like, no wonder he left. Like, the disrespect to Shane Doan is crazy. I'm sure for a lot of us who follow the story closely and done a lot of reading and reporting on this in the past, it might not come as a huge surprise, but really, it's not a wonder that the franchise failed under this owner. And I have almost no confidence that he's going to get things done to bring the Coyotes back. I do think that hockey can survive in Arizona. I think it can work just great, but it has to be the right owner in an arena in the right spot. And like I said, he's not the guy to do it. I will be shocked if he reactivates his franchise. And if he somehow pulls off a miracle, I hope that he sells it as soon as he's able to and moves on, because this guy is not what the NHL needs. It will not be successful. Like I said, do you like imagine him trying to build an arena and to pay all the contractors, subcontractors, all these people building, and he's just going to try to undercut them all the time? It's not going to go well. Like, the business practices and the way he does things are just ridiculous. So I'm sure some of these details may not be shocking or surprising. Maybe they will, depending on how much you know about this team and what you've learned in the past. But at the end of the day, are we really surprised that it failed under this ownership group? We really shouldn't be. Again, I feel terrible for the loyal fans of the Coyotes franchise. I hope one day you get what you deserve in a good owner that actually has the right, mindset and the deep pockets to make it work. And I think it can work. It needs the right people involved. And I hope you get that in the not too distant future, because I know it's a market that the NHL would really like to be in and would really like to be successful. But let me know your thoughts on these scathing details on this ownership group in Arizona down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. Of course, we cover all things NHL. You get all the news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.